Hey. Okay, great. All right. We are live. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Legislative Forum on Cannabis, sponsored by Norwalk and Westport. As you're arriving, would you please introduce yourselves in the chat? We're letting people join so we can get going in a minute. As you join us, please introduce yourselves in the chat and welcome. And also, would you please edit your screen name so everyone can see who you are when you're talking. All right. Good morning, good morning. I don't know if everyone's hearing all these bing bongs as people keep joining the room. So sorry, as we're just sort of admitting folks, welcome, welcome. I see we have a number of our representatives here today already. We're expecting, I think, the full delegation from Norwalk and from Westport, which is really terrific. Those of you who are joining now, please introduce yourselves in the chat and edit your screen name. We're really delighted to have you here today. So I see Rep. Sims, Rep. Perrone, Senator Haskell, Jonathan Steinberg is the first one on. Hi, Lucy, David Michelle, Stephanie Thomas. Those are the names I'm seeing so far. Thank you all for joining us today. And because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see who else. So we have the first select woman from Westport here, right? Let's let Senator Wong in. Do we have Mayor Rilling yet? Anybody?
Not yet. I don't see him yet.
Hi, Margaret. I don't see him yet. I'll get an ETA.
Okay, thanks, Lamont. Well, with so many folks here, we're going to start in just a second. I think what we'll do is have the select woman and our representative, our municipal representatives welcome everybody. That would be Mayor Rilling, Select Woman Tooker, and then Elaine and Lamont. You can tell us who you are and kind of give the context for this meeting. So Lamont, just let us know if we should wait for Mayor Rilling or get going.
Sure, give me one moment.
Sure.
One moment, Margaret.
How's everybody doing so early on Monday morning?
Pretty good.
Doing well.
Good, good. I know, look, that sounds really positive. I know basically everyone out there is either sick, recovering, or has someone at home sick, right? This is
This is true.
a lot going on right now. So we really appreciate everyone being here.
Hi, Margaret. If the first select can introduce, the mayor should be right on. The internet is not being kind to him this morning.
All right. So please take it away, Selectwoman Tooker.
Thank you, Margaret, and good morning, everyone, and happy 2022. It's really wonderful to be here. My name is Jennifer Tooker. I'm the newly elected first select woman of Westport. I do want to acknowledge the fact that I believe our entire Westport state legislative delegation is here. Representative Steinberg and Thomas and Senators Wong and Haskell. So thank you very much for joining us and for everybody who's participating this morning. And just a little bit by way of introduction, I have had the pleasure of I guess, yeah, I mean, really the pleasure of working with and really understanding the Prevention Coalition's work in Westport over the last couple of years. And I just want to say a very big thank you to all of the experts who are here with us this morning. I've relied a lot on your expertise in the last couple of years in Westport, and I know that we'll have a really good conversation this morning. So thank you very much for hosting this.
Thank you. Lamont, should you and Elaine want to start and we can let Mayor Rilling weigh in when he gets here?
That'd be great. Thanks.
All right.
Lamond, I thought you should go first. I sent you an email yesterday.
Oh, great. Thank you for putting me on the spot.
Oh, I have no doubt that you have something to share.
Thank you. Great morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. I think it's important, as we all know, the mayor's trying to get in. You know, we're all talking about what does this mean for our communities, and also want to acknowledge the mayor will be joining us shortly, but also want to acknowledge both our Norwalk represented elected officials. Good morning to all of you. I can only see about 4 people with the agenda, so I don't know who else is on, but I know many of you are on, so great morning to you all. But I'll just share this so we can keep moving quickly, that many of you all may not know on the call, that Elaine and I have a relationship. And I think that's important to elevate, in that as community providers from the social service perspective, we talk. And Elaine and I have thought about, you know, what kind of partnership can we do? Well, here it is. It's here. And we know our residents utilize some services in Westport and so forth. The Westport certainly use services in Westport. So it makes sense to bring our communities, which are neighbors, together and think about, you know, what does that mean for our communities? What does that mean in our partnership? And what does that mean for us as we think through around, you know, what our ordinances are doing? The mayor may talk a little about that we are in discussion around our town ordinances and what that looks like, so forth. So this is just a time for us to be together. Most certainly after this meeting, Elaine and I will be talking a lot more to figure out what that means. And so it's just exciting to be here. And so for that, Elaine, I'll turn it over to you. But again, good morning, and thank you for inviting me here. And the mayor will be on shortly. His assistant just said
he got on.
it is still. Oh, great.
The mayor is on now. My computer didn't like Monday morning either.
I said it, Mayor. I said the internet's not being kind to you this morning.
Mayor Rilling, would you like to say anything?
No, thank you for inviting us. Just quickly, you know, we have been discussing this issue, how it's going to affect Norwalk, what kinds of restrictions we might want to put in place. We're looking at the law very carefully. It's a challenging thing, especially for law enforcement. And I know Ginger is on, a challenging thing for me as a former police chief, but we're trying to work through it and looking at where we might, if we're going to have these outlets, where they might be located. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elaine Dano, and I'm the Director of Human Services in Westport. It's great to see all of our legislators here, and I'm thrilled to see the amount of people that care about this issue that have jumped on the call. As I look around, many of whom are on the Westport Prevention Coalition, and I must say that this is a group of very passionate, dedicated people interested in what's in the best interest of our population, and also who recognize how closely intermingled Westport and Norwalk are. I think we all know that. I'm not going to repeat what Lamont said, but I do have to say that this collaboration is really important. As we know, we have really one market for marijuana. We share a market for marijuana, actually. So we know that if people aren't going to Westport to purchase when recreational facilities open, they would be going to Norwalk and surrounding communities. And so it's important that we really look at messaging and enforcement and how we're going to look out for the safe and healthy well-being of our individuals. I will share that Westport has actually voted in a prohibition of the sale of recreational marijuana. That happened a while ago, a few months ago. And that resolution, we do have a medical marijuana dispensary in town. That resolution was established by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Right now it's in perpetuity, but anybody can open that up and revisit the issue. So that's why it's even more important that we have this conversation. And then lastly, I would just mention that, the marijuana legislation, while it can be very good for a lot of different reasons, it is going to affect our community and especially our young people. I'm sure that Dave and Kevin will talk about that. But I can tell you from my experiences in working in the schools is that marijuana is very prominent, and it is a problem because kids don't really understand it's legal and they don't think it's a problem to utilize it. And we also know that there's a lot of mental health issues that come along with marijuana use. So with that, I will just say thank you to Margaret and Kevin and everyone else for planning this event, and I'll pass it back over to Margaret.
Thanks, Elaine. Everyone, I want to just add on here that I'm so grateful to have been working with so many of I'm Margaret Watt. I'm the Prevention Director at Positive Directions, which is the Center for Prevention and Counseling located in Westport and working throughout the region. I co-chair both the Norwalk Prevention Coalition and the Westport Prevention Coalition. So it's been a pleasure to work with all the different advocates and stakeholders represented here today. I do want to acknowledge Jen Tooker already mentioned we've got the full Westport delegation here today. We're expecting the full Norwalk delegation as well. I do see Terry Wood, Chris Brown, Travis Sims, Stephanie Thomas, and Lucy Dathan here, and we're expecting Senator Duff. So thank you all for being here. So today's meeting is really going to focus on the state issues. We want to provide the opportunity for the different sectors represented here today to inform you about challenges that we foresee in implementing the new law with recommendations for improving it. So our hope is that a committee such as the Public Health Committee, and I know 3 of our reps here today are on the Public Health Committee, could raise an amendment to tighten and strengthen the law in ways that will better protect our youth, support the public health, and support our communities. So what's going to happen is we are going to start with a very brief, maybe 8 or 9 minute presentation just to get us all on the same page about the basics of cannabis that everyone should know, because the reality is most adults aren't super well informed about what we're talking about today in terms of the product or the law. And then we're going to highlight prevention, health, law enforcement, and community issues. When we go to each of those 4 topics, you're going to hear from people who work in that area specifically. They will make brief remarks for 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll have some opportunity immediately for clarifying questions from you guys. And so the whole program will take, starting now, about 60 minutes. And then after it ends, we will be able to remain online for anyone who has additional follow-up questions. We'll also send out a recording of the full meeting. So that's the plan. And we're going to start with a brief overview of whoops, that's not it. A brief overview of cannabis today. And I have to try to find this, hang on. Oh, here we go. Sorry, so I'm losing my screen. So I was thinking Layla was going to be managing this for me, but it looks like she wasn't able to get on. So I actually pre-recorded some brief remarks about cannabis because I was losing my voice. So let me know if you can page about what we're talking about in terms of cannabis.
Yes,
and
a little louder.
text for the points that we want to highlight. First of all, cannabis, also known as marijuana, we may be picturing this kind of plant from nature, but we want to highlight that it exists in various forms and it's nothing like what it used to be in nature. There's been 50 years of genetic engineering of this product so that it's much, much stronger today. By much stronger, what I'm referring to is the percent THC that's in the plant now. So let's differentiate THC and CBD. THC is the drug that we've legalized, right? It's like the psychoactive substance in the plant. It gets people high or stoned. It can cause anxiety and paranoia. CBD, in contrast, is not psychoactive and can relieve anxiety. So today's plant products contain a lot more CBD than in the past, so they are much, much stronger. In addition, not only do we have plant products today, we have concentrates, which, as the name implies, have are very, very intense ways of delivering the drug. So chemical processes are used to condense the THC, oils, melting them down, whatever, turning them into things called wax or shatter, dabs, oils, all of which are extremely high strength forms of THC with the plant matter removed. We also have edible products, and the new law is going to allow a variety of forms of packaging that look like food, as well as beverages. So from the point of view of normalizing that this is something that we consume as a regular basis, that's going to go a long way. When I say that the product today is much stronger than in the past, take a look at this timeline. If you had any personal experience with cannabis in one of these decades, just see how it's increased over time from 1% THC in the plant product in the 70s up to 23% by 2019, which is when the Surgeon General issued the warning that it's very dangerous for teen brain development. And now, with the concentrated forms like dabs and wax and so forth, it can actually be up to 96% pure THC that people are consuming. So that means it is nothing like what anyone's really ever experienced until they've had that happen. Research says above 10% THC is associated with exacerbated mental illness and also potential development of psychosis. But no products out there are really at that 10% level anymore. They're much farther. So the Connecticut law caps plants at plant matter at 30% THC, concentrates at 60% THC, which means bringing the existing levels back down, and edibles can't have more than 5 milligrams of THC per unit. So that's what the product is. How does it affect the health, people's health? Because that's really what's not in the law. Well, people need to understand that it actually has a negative and permanent effect on brain development in teens. Anything you inhale into your lungs, so if you're vaping or smoking it, can be associated with things like bronchitis. There's something called popcorn lung. E-Valley, etc. Cannabis does create a faster heartbeat and can be associated with heart attack. It crosses the placental wall. Pregnant women and lactating women should not be using cannabis because it does affect the baby's development and weakens the immune system. On the other hand, it can provide relief from glaucoma, nausea, and pain. So just focusing on the brain, things that people need to be aware of, but really aren't, are that it's addictive. When I was in high school, we were told specifically that marijuana was not addictive, but 1 in 10 adults gets addicted and 1 in 6 teens gets addicted. Teens who use a couple times a week lose 6 to 8 IQ points and are at much increased risk of psychosis. There's been a 300% increase in psychosis hospitalizations in the state of Connecticut just in a 3-year period. And cannabis exacerbates all kinds of mental illness. It also does things like affect your memory, your awareness of distance, your response time, your judgment. Those are factors from a public health perspective that mean driving under the influence is dangerous. So whether you're driving under the influence of cannabis or alcohol, that's going to be illegal. But the new law does limit law enforcement's ability to conduct traffic stops, for example. So these are all factors that we think are relevant to raise as this new market goes into effect. What we know from local, state, and national data is that the general public doesn't particularly perceive marijuana or cannabis as harmful. So we're going to have a new market, but our consumers aren't going to be particularly well informed unless we do things like add warning labels, which we have on alcohol and cigarettes, right? Unless we provide health education. You should know the state of Connecticut has never done any kind of marijuana prevention or education aimed at the general public. And so these are some of the things we want to talk about. In states that legalized marijuana, there were some pretty major impacts: 25% increase in teen addiction, increase in marijuana hospitalizations, increase in calls to the poison control centers. This is why things like compliance, enforcement, and awareness are going to be so important. There's also going to be a social equity impact on neighborhoods. The state law doesn't do anything about regulating outlet density, for example, leaving it to municipalities. So what we're going to have, for example, is that Westport will have no marijuana sales locations. And meanwhile, South Norwalk has these 3 locations on the same block that have just opened up in recent months, ready to go. The expected tax revenue is going to be used to create what's called a social equity fund to allow small business owners from places like South Norwalk to invest in the cannabis industry, and a prevention and recovery services fund to cover not just prevention and recovery, but also treatment and data collection. These are the intended revenues to go to those content areas, but they don't start until 2024. So that's the context that we want for today's conversation. And now I'm going to give you Ginger Katz for a personal story.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here with all of you. My name is Ginger Katz, founder and CEO of the Courage to Speak Foundation, which is dedicated to empowering youth to be drug-free and encouraging parents to their children about the dangers of drugs. By the way, I've spoken and presented at Staples High School for over 12 years, and I've done a tremendous amount of work in Norwalk and probably presented about 300 times. We lost our son Ian 25 years ago. He was a bright college student, called up crying from college, begging for help, and within 5 months, he died of a drug overdose containing heroin and a prescription drug. He had his whole life ahead of him, but unfortunately we lost him. As I reflect on the journey going through his addiction, I recall the freshman year we received a phone call from the police officer. "Mrs. Katz, I have your son here. He's been found in the park with 2 other boys and we brought them in. And please come down to the station." I arrived with Ian's stepfather and myself, and Ian couldn't even look at us. He was so embarrassed. Within 3 minutes, the police officer looked at us, went back to Ian and said, if I ever find you in this town again, I'm going to arrest you if you have drugs. If you're using drugs, now go home. A lieutenant who had seen my presentation said that particular officer enabled Ian. Enabling is allowing a behavior to continue without a consequence. So the message to Ian was probably no big thing. There were lack of consequences, but it was a red flag for me. I just want to say that the potency that Ian was exposed to was anywhere from 3 to 10% 25 years ago. Now it's up to 45%, possibly even 60%, and even more with the edibles and other marijuana products. It wreaked havoc on our family, especially during these high school years. And we lost him in his junior year. We knew relapse was part of the recovery. I truly believe marijuana is associated with opiate use. And these are the drugs that led Ian to the drugs that killed him. Next slide, please. How you can help. Strengthen the law to, number one, increase consequences to deter and prevent drug use, youth use, provide health warnings and prevention education, support our local enforcement with compliance checks, traffic and stops, consider outlet density to protect our communities. We're all here to protect our communities. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ginger. So these are the 4 topics we're going to focus on next, and we're going to start with inviting members of the Norwalk and Westport Youth Services Bureaus. That's Kevin Godburn from Westport, Dave Walenchik from Norwalk, and Melissa McGarry, who's a Westport Coalition member and also a preventionist, to talk to you about these issues.
I guess I'll start. One of the things that we have a concern about is, I think one of the intentions for youth who are arrested for possession of marijuana is diversion to restorative justice programming, also known as the juvenile review boards. And one of the problems that's been happening really over the last few years is changes in this legislation. You know, there's been an overall desire to keep juveniles out of the juvenile justice system, which is admirable. But because, for instance, in the past, youths who were referred to the juvenile review board program for truancy or for issues of beyond control, if they didn't engage or successfully complete the juvenile review board restorative justice programming, there was the potential that it could be sent to court, and that really acted as an incentive for them to engage with and complete the programming, and it actually aided to our degree of success with youth who were referred to that program. That's now changed. So youth who are deemed beyond control or truant, if they're referred to the juvenile review board program after, other community interventions that the schools may have applied or the police department may have applied, and they choose not to engage in that program because it is voluntary, we're somewhat limited in what we can do. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is we're going to be seeing this with referrals for youth who've been arrested for possession of marijuana, that probably a lot of them are going to get referred to restorative justice programming. And if the families choose not to engage, we're going to be limited in terms of how effective we can be with them. If they say, hey, this sounds great, we don't want to do it. If it's a juvenile who's arrested for a serious fight or for stealing a car or for some other, even for shoplifting, if the family says we don't want to do it, the case would get sent to court. Most families don't want to go to court. That makes sense. So it's enough of a incentive for them to engage in the community-based programming like the JRB. But if that isn't there, I think there's a concern about some of these kids falling through the cracks.
Thanks, Dave. And Kevin and Melissa, I don't remember which of you was going to present first.
Sure. I know, Melissa, I know you were going to talk a little bit about the education prevention efforts, but if you don't mind, I'll just jump in just to piggyback on what Dave was saying. So I think with Westport, Westport and Norwalk, we'll probably see a lot of similar challenges, but also some differences. And I think we may also echo some of the greater obstacles and opportunities in the YSB system. But I think very similar to what Dave was saying in terms of the engagement with youth. What we see in Westport is it really varies. For some kids or some families, referrals that come in for police or school intervention, that's enough for them to really be a catalyst to take action, and they'll come into our office and already have supports lined up. But that's not always the case. We've had a family recently that it was referred to our office for possession intervention, and the family was surprised because in their words, they thought it was legal now. So I think the education, as Melissa will get to, is going to be really critical, really important. We see a lot of similarities with the relationship and the family values around alcohol that are similar to what we see with marijuana. In the Westport survey that was just done this past spring, we know that the perception of risk around cannabis for youth is about half what it is for alcohol. And we know that the perception of parent disapproval is also much lower than it is for alcohol with kids. So certainly educating and putting money into prevention work, but also with regard to the engagement, YSBs with the influx of referrals are really going to need to have a full toolkit, both to support the families, but also for engagement. And Dave may be seeing this as well in Norwalk, but there's a limit to what we can realistically mandate or put in place. And there will be some families that come in and they've had a bad experience with counseling or with an outpatient program. So right off the bat, that's either off the table or it's a really hard sell. So the more that we can have in place, the more supports that we can either have in-house or be able to, or funding that we can outsource to other providers, it is going to be helpful just in terms of addressing and supporting these families and brainstorming and coming up with options for them to get the help that they need.
Yeah, to piggyback on what both these gentlemen have been talking about, for introduction, I'm Melissa McGarry. I'm a Westport parent of 3 teenagers and young adults, but I also work in the prevention field. So I'm living and working in this new cannabis environment. So I thank you for your time today just to talk about a couple of the issues that are concerning to those of us who are parents and prevention professionals. Margaret presented some really great data on the potency and the increased potency of this product. The fact that there's a growing body of evidence that anything over 10% THC is considered high potency and has serious mental health and physical health consequences. The fact that we capped the potency at 30% for plant and 60% for concentrates is concerning in itself. The fact that there's a specific exclusion for any cap for pre-filled vape cartridges is a really strong concern for those of us, because those are the products that kids prefer because they're easy to hide and easy to, less odor, less signs that they're using. In local high schools in Fairfield County, SROs, school resource officers who have confiscated those products in the school system have tested them and found them to have THC levels in excess of 90–95% THC. So there's some real concern for us that those products were specifically excluded in the law. So, it's our request that that be revisited. The other issue is advertising. I think when you look at the law, intent versus execution jumps out because the law states that any advertising must be placed in a location that is going to be seen by at least 90% of the viewers are going to be over the age of 21. Anybody who has driven up I-95 and reached Bridgeport can see that there is a cannabis billboard that is positioned at the Route 895 exchange that is located at the exit for the Webster Arena, the Hartford Healthcare Amphitheater, Housatonic Community College, and Payer College, which is the former University of Bridgeport. So it's hard to make the case that 90% of the traffic that passes up 95 is over age 21. These billboard, some billboard companies, not all, but some have clearly found a loophole in this bill. So it would also be our request that that be reviewed, because clearly the intent and the execution aren't matching. And there is science that says the more advertisements that kids see, the lower their perception of harm is, and the more normalized this product is for them. So that's another aspect of the bill that's really troubling for those of us in the field. Margaret, I don't know if there are other slides in this section that you wanted me to highlight.
Yes, did you want to talk at all about did you want to talk about some of the data here?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that when we prevention people talk about preventing youth use, whether it's alcohol, vaping, marijuana, a lot of time we ask them about their parental disapproval, because we know that parents are the biggest factor in whether kids use. And a recent survey, Margaret's got a slide up, a recent survey in our region that was done just this past spring showed that the kids who use, the kids who believe their parents didn't disapprove were more than seven times more likely to use cannabis than those who believe their parents did disapprove. So there's a giant gap here between the kids who know that the adults in their lives disapprove, which is why we need the help to educate adults as well as kids about the dangers of these products for our youth. And then I think you have a slide on perception of harm, right? And then perception of harm, and the fact that obviously we launched this product in Connecticut as a medical, a medicinal product. So we're also fighting against the concept that this product is completely benign and that there is no real harms. And you can see there's a black bar across the bottom of your screen, Margaret, so I can't see the actual number for the kids who do believe it's harmful, but you can see the big gap between use amongst those. There you go. We're talking 10 times more likely to use if you believe it's harmful than those who don't believe it's harmful. So, switch that. So I think that is important to recognize that when we send these messages to our kids, particularly those of you on the Public Health Committee, we need better education, and we need more money at the front end to do this widespread education about the health risks of this product. And then I think the next slide is just to highlight, and I think our law enforcement partners will talk in more detail about this. There is a broad gap. This is a document that was distributed by DCP and DPH and DMIS about the penalties for these products. And although schools are being required to make sure that cannabis penalties line up with alcohol penalties, the law in itself does not treat them equally. There is, not a strong there's not a strong possession law. There's a verbal warning, and I'll let our law enforcement partners talk a little bit about that. But we're asking that in prevention, consequences matter. And when we talk to kids and when they see there are no consequences for use, that certainly affects how they perceive the harm of that activity.
That's great. Thanks, Melissa. I saw Rep. Dathan had a question. Why don't we take like a couple of clarification questions where any of our legislators really have more, want to get more information about this topic, and then we'll move on to our subsequent topics. So we get through everything, and then final Q&A. Lucy.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone putting this on. This is really informative and useful, and I really appreciate it. Just wanted to get some clarification on the advertising. I had spotted some advertising, took some pictures, and sent it to the Attorney General's office like back in September. I did get a call from them saying that they are investigating it. But I think the main billboard company, which was Lamar, said that they felt that there was 90% of the traffic was over 21. And bearing in mind that when we spotted it, I had 3 of my under 18-year-olds in the car. So, and there was 5 of us. So I'm pretty good at math, but that's definitely not 90%. So it is something that I fully agree and fully on board that we need to make sure that we can do. I would say that, I understand that they are pursuing this, and we have tighter language than some of our surrounding states in regards to this. So I know that this is super important. So I'm continuing to follow it, and hopefully I will follow up again today, because I haven't spoken to them since October on this, but I know it was something that they were pursuing.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Senator Wong.
Thank you. It's a great gathering here, and thank you for raising the important questions that impact our community, our children. And I'm glad that Representative Steinberg has the chair, and I'm the ranking in public health. It's amazing to me that this bill that's passed that we're all talking about never went to the public health. We never had the engagement of activists like all of you to be able to educate us on the impact on the passage of a bill that we did in Hartford. So I just want to be clear on that part of the frustration I have is we're going to be part of the solution of a bill that we got passed. But my disappointment is, where was this dialogue? Where was this information? I know about it, but how did we pass a bill in Hartford that will impact our community without having input from law enforcement, from experts like all of you, the medical professionals? So I'm here to try to make the best of a bad situation, and I'll be very supportive. But my frustration is, how did it come to this without listening to the experts? So I'm all ears, and I want to be able to be part of the solution, but I want to be on a lookout that any amendments that you like to offer to make this a more secure, while protecting individual choices and rights, is important. But I would take any information you have, and I'd be happy to raise it on the floor. And I hope that Representative Steinberg will join me as part of the leadership team on public health to have this conversation. So thank you very much for having this, and I appreciate everybody being part of this.
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to have us move on to the health considerations of the bill that aren't specific to youth and public health, so other health considerations. And we're going to start with Denise Rollinson from Norwalk Community Health Center, followed by Dr. Robin Oshman from the Fairfield County Medical Association.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Denise Rollinson, and I work for Norwalk Community Health Center. I'm a behavioral health clinician. And one of the things that I always like to think about is, as I am a licensed substance abuse counselor along with an LMFT and other practices, I also like to think about the fact that marijuana began as a Schedule I drug. And that basically means that at one point in time, we considered it a drug. We considered a chemical reaction that was happening within the body and causing changes. So I kind of find it interesting when we talk about recreation, it's a kind of a different issue. But just in general, when it comes to health, we always like to think about things that make us healthy. And people who use marijuana, they do have trouble they do cough more, they have more phlegm, and they have things because the body is reacting to an irritant. Mothers, the marijuana does pass through breast milk and also can pass through the placenta. So little babies are kind of getting influenced by it. And this kind of is concerning, especially too, because when we look at some of the studies that are being done on adolescents now, we're noticing that there has been like a 6 to 8 point drop in IQ with chronic marijuana users in adolescence. So I always kind of think, okay, if we go backwards to the developing brain, to the littlest when they're in the womb and when they're outside the womb, maybe, breastfeeding or whatever, some of the consequences that may be happening. And there are some consequences in terms of, motor development is slower. There's some neurological issues that come up sometimes with chronic influence of marijuana, and also in brain development, because that's a developing brain. So, so I know that the age that they have in consideration is age 21. I guess the problem is that usually the brain kind of more solidifies around age 25. So that's kind of interesting. Also, cannabis has also been associated with psychosis and bringing on further mental health issues to other people that may not have had them, or it may have been brought out when it was laying dormant. Increased risk of heart attacks, sometimes in strokes, because it does raise the heart rate some beats in the minute. There also is sometimes there's some arrhythmias. Okay. And sometimes there is some association with marijuana and opiate use. So it's adding another substance, which also has some risk to health and overdose. What we're basically looking for is kind of a caveat between health education and also some forms of labeling to identify some of the health risks, because as it was stated prior, by Margaret, by Melissa, by, everyone so far, parents are not aware that there's health risks, and so like educating the community in terms of like, if you take certain medications, they have certain little labels on them that make people aware, don't drink, don't drive while you're taking this medication until you see how it affects you and everything. And as you know, driving, is impaired. People can be impaired with, reaction time and different things that are the basic functions of driving that can put ourselves at risk. So what we're trying to do is kind of find a way to increase health education and also increase warning labels and different things, and maybe making warning labels and different things more user-friendly for our community, so that they're aware of them. Something, a lot of times when you go to the doctor and you get a medication, the doctor gives you the 15-page insert that you're supposed to read with your medication when you're not feeling well. And a lot of people don't tend to read them, and they're not written in user-friendly language. And so we're kind of asking that maybe in this case, we can have some, friendly, user-friendly language so that people can be made aware, so that people have informed consent as to what's going on. In some of the cases, with CBD and stuff, real care has to be also to let people know that in CBD, there's sometimes a delay in time. So it's important to let people know that, if it doesn't seem like it's working, you still need to wait a while, because then other people tend to add some more. And the potency of marijuana has gone up significantly. So, these kinds of things. So what we're looking for is kind of warning labels, maybe some posters that kind of, show some risks, like if you're going to put up a billboard, maybe put up a billboard that talks about some of our health risks, because marijuana, recreational or not, is still a substance and is still, chemically reacts with the body as a drug. And given that our children are dropping IQ points, that kind of concerns me, because adolescents are our future and our future community. And so anything that could help them, be a more contributing member to the community. And, we have always the jokes of, people under the influence don't tend to do things. They don't tend to contribute. They tend to be lethargic. They tend to be disinterested in activities and participating in life itself. So in terms of quality of the community, it can also present a risk. So just letting people know through health education, some things to consider as they make informed choices, and, certain types of use can be more risky than others. And certain types of use have their own risks. And so that people can at least be informed so that they can make better choices so they don't, end up in our emergency rooms or, lost lives or anything like that. The new law requires only a warning statement that cannabis is limited to age of 21 and should be kept out of the hands of children, but it doesn't say anything about nursing moms or things like that who may love their children and not think about it, so it's just kind of like to help people kind of say, if they are going to use in more safe ways, in ways that decrease risks and harm to our community. And I really want to thank you, and I hope I didn't overspeak, and I hope you were able to hear at least some of what I said. I apologize. I'm remoting from home today with everything going on. But I wanted to wish everybody a wonderful day, and thank you all for, everybody's so busy and giving up their time at this time. I just wanted to also say thank you. And I'm also going to let Dr. Robin Oshman say whatever she would like to add, I'm sure. And also she has recommended some wonderful warning labels to consider, from her as a medical professional. Thank you, everyone, and thank you.
So I'm just going to start talking, and I wanted to address what Senator Tony Wang said was, what kind of amendments can we make to these laws? And one thing that you can do is put warning labels on anything that's being sold out there. So I'm going to keep my comments short because we had a great talk by Denise here, who covered a lot of ground. The warning labels that I'm going to recommend are 5. They're based on evidence-based literature from a site called Dynamed, which is a site that doctors go to as a support tool to decide how to treat patients and how to evaluate different medications. So the first warning would be that smoking may impair driving. The NIH supports this. They said cannabis use is linked to increased risk of motor vehicle crashes. So that's the first one, smoking may impair driving. The second one is about pregnancy. Cannabis use during pregnancy has been linked to lower birth weight infants. That's also been supported by the NIH, the National Institute of Health. And so the warning on that should read, smoking cannabis during pregnancy may result in low birth weight infants. And some people understand that medicinal marijuana is used for nausea during chemotherapy treatments. I'm sure that some pregnant women may have morning sickness and think that this is a way of treating it. It's not, it's a different kind of mechanism that's involved with that. And the OBGYN community is advising all pregnant women not to smoke marijuana and also not to take medicinal marijuana. And they're also discouraging lactating women from doing this because, as Denise pointed out, we do see that in the milk there is transfer of marijuana. The third point has to do with our adolescence. The brain is still developing at up to age 21. Anyone below that age smoking this marijuana is at increase of developing something called cannabis use disorder, which is what people are thinking as addiction, but it has a special name, cannabis use disorder. They're at risk of psychotic symptoms if they're genetically predisposed to getting this. They can have altered brain development associated with lower educational attainment. They have a likelihood to use other substances. And some animal model research has shown that you can recalibrate the brain's reward system. So it makes it more sensitive to other drugs. So the warning on here should be that cannabis should be out of reach of children and young adults less than 21 years of age. And we've heard from so many people that this is not happening and that their parents are not aware of all the ramifications of smoking this. The fourth label deals with oral cannabis or edibles. There should be a warning on the label that it takes 30 to 60 minutes after ingestion to experience the effect of these edibles. People don't realize that it takes that length of time when you swallow this substance, and they're apt to take a lot more of the edibles in order to reach their high, thinking that it's not working. And that can result in anxiety, dysphoria, paranoia, panic, agitation, psychotic symptoms. It's really not a good idea to take a lot of this. So you need to put some kind of warning on these labels for the edibles that it does take 30 to 60 minutes to feel the effects of the marijuana in the edibles. And my last point is mixing cannabis with other substances. You know, we've already heard from Ginger about her son, Ian, who had heroin mixed with prescription drugs and came to an awful ending. Cannabis alcohol leads to nausea, vomiting, panic, anxiety, and paranoia. Cannabis with ecstasy leads to decreased motivation, impaired memory, and mental health problems. And cannabis mixed with over-the-counter drugs or prescription drugs is totally unpredictable. There's not enough research on that yet, but we know that it probably does interact. And so the warning label should be, do not mix cannabis with other substances or other drugs. So those are the 5 points that I'd like to make. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them later.
That was great, Robin. Thank you so much. And I saw that Rep. Wood had raised her hand. Terry?
Yes, thank you, Margaret. This has been a very good presentation. I appreciate it tremendously. A number of these issues that you are raising, we did raise in the House floor during the debate. So I think many of us feel very strongly about these, and very happy to work with Tony and Lucy and the delegation on some of these amendments or bill proposals to amend the legislation. So thank you. I think especially the warning labels, when you do get, Denise mentioned when you get a prescription and you open it and that it's 5-fold pages and it's such small font, you can't read it. So I hope whatever we write this in, the font is bold and large, because these are significant concerns and we need to address it and be helpful.
And user friendly, as not everyone speaks English.
Fair point.
Right.
Absolutely fair point. Yep.
That's actually why one of the things we were thinking is really that there can be visual materials at point of sale showing, pictures of the places in the body that are affected and so forth.
Yes,
But
and so many
terrific.
instructions now do come in multiple languages, but large font is key and bright colors so they read it.
And pictures.
And pictures, right. So thank you. This has been very helpful.
Thank you. So you guys, I want to recognize it's almost 10. I know we sort of got the real presentation going around quarter after. We do want to hear about law enforcement considerations and also some community considerations. So I'm going to ask our next presenters to try to keep really focused on basic info and what our ask is. And I'm going to ask everyone to stay on as long as you can. But if you do have to start leaving at some point, we'll certainly be able to make the recording available. So for law enforcement, we have, I think, Lieutenant Prezioso from Westport PD, Sergeant Orr from Norwalk PD, and Detective Del Vecchio from Westport PD with us today. So Lieutenant Prezioso.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate everyone's time this morning. I will try to keep it brief and try to just hit on some of the broad strokes overviews of the things that I see as kind of problematic with the language of this legislation. I think just overall, really, there's a lot of things within the legislation that are unclear or overly complex. A lot of the enforcement is based largely around quantities of marijuana and the way in which it is stored. So much so that there's actually a statute within the legislation that addresses quantities of concentrated marijuana. So you're talking about dab versus the plant-based material. What you have is essentially a very difficult way of determining these amounts when you're going to do things like limit the ability for an officer to either stop a vehicle or search a person.
I didn't understand that.
ever make these determinations. So basically, you've got a provision within the bill that essentially says that the existence of any of the following shall not constitute in part or in whole probable cause or reasonable suspicion, and shall not be used as a basis to support any stop of a search or search of a person or motor vehicle. And those conditions are the odor of cannabis or burnt cannabis, the possession or suspicion of possession of cannabis without evidence that the quantity is in excess of 5 ounces, or the presence of cash or currency in proximity to cannabis without evidence that cash exceeds $500. Resultingly, any evidence discovered as a result of a stop or search in violation of this section shall not be admissible. When you couple that with the inability to ask for consent to search based on a provision in the Police Accountability Bill, I think we can all see why that would be very, very problematic, especially as it relates to motor vehicle stops. We are prohibited from making motor vehicle stops solely on the basis of observing someone smoking cannabis, even though we have legislation here that prevents either the driver or the passenger from smoking cannabis while they're in the vehicle. So I don't understand why we would not make an officer being able to make a visual determination, using your 5 senses that people are ingesting cannabis in the car, make a provision to prevent an officer from stopping the vehicle for that purpose. Basically, the marijuana is just the start to marijuana, as was previously mentioned, to be laced with a lot of other things. When you're conducting an investigation, even for operating under the influence, one of the most important things is to know what the person is impaired under, and limiting the ability to search a vehicle or search a person to determine what it is that they are impaired by is obviously problematic for prosecution, also problematic for necessarily for making that arrest and raising to the level of probable cause. It's probably a good point to transition onto the kind of the over-reliance on drug recognition experts. Every officer is trained to make an arrest for driving under the influence when it comes to alcohol. When you're starting to delve into other things and the possibility that the person is impaired on something other than alcohol, generally that's when you would rely on a drug recognition expert. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but there's approximately 20 something in the entire state. I can speak for the Westport Police Department that we do not have any drug recognition expert officers certified at this time. I'm well aware that the legislation did create a statewide impaired driving task force to put forth recommendations on how we're going to get up to speed to deal with this, but we're certainly not there yet. So that's definitely something that I would see as problematic, especially when you have a 2-hour window when you initially make an arrest to the time that you're going to conduct any kind of chemical testing to prove that someone is operating under the influence. I know it was touched on earlier. I won't belabor the points, but yes, consequences for youth are not necessarily in line with alcohol penalties. I think we have a very good roadmap there with alcohol penalties in terms of the severity of what those are. And it is very clear if you look at the penalties for marijuana that it is not viewed the same way. When you're talking about things like written warnings or relying on youth service bureaus to sort of do the educational piece that, marijuana is bad for you. I'm not so sure that sends the right message. And the only other thing that I would touch upon is, something that we're obviously all aware of, but, marijuana is still illegal on a federal level. We have officers that do work on narcotics task force. In some cases, they pair up with counterparts from federal law enforcement. And we've actually put language on the books that essentially says that an officer cannot even use so much as their time to partake in an investigation, which would be conducted in conjunction with a federal law enforcement officer. If cannabis is any way a part of that investigation, it could be problematic because, again, federal law enforcement is not working under the same guidelines that we are. So some key points. I don't know if Detective Delvecchio or Sergeant Orr have anything else to add, but that's my piece.
Hi, how are you? Okay.
Ashley or Dave, you want to add on?
Hi, Detective Delvecchio from Westport. Thank you for having this meeting today. Just 2 things I wanted to add on. Lieutenant Prezios did a great job. We've been discussing this together. But the social hosting law for the state is in effect for alcohol. And we found deep within the bill, actually Melissa McGarry found it, that it is in effect for marijuana. So maybe putting that out there more to parents is a consideration. And also Lieutenant Prezioso and I found that possession of marijuana, or if you are arrested and convicted under the age of 21, it does still affect your driver's license. So that was something that was put out for kids in the past when they were given an infraction for marijuana. So, you know, if we could put that out there more to the public so they're aware. Sergeant Orr, you have anything?
Good morning. No, I think the lieutenant and detective really covered it. I would only add that for juveniles in the schools, I oversee the SRO program here in Norwalk. And since marijuana has been legalized, there is no more social stigma against it. You know, if you've got mom and dad having a glass of wine with dinner, you could effectively at this point have them sharing a joint as well. And this conveys a message to kids that it's okay, that there's nothing wrong with it. And we're going to see that start to proliferate even more in the schools. I've certainly seen an uptick of vaping and edible use in the schools here in Norwalk this year, primarily because they're undetectable. You kids can walk in with a pocket full of edibles and hand them out. And a lot of that stuff, if it's coming from the illegal market, is unregulated, and we don't know what the concentrations are. And we've had some overdoses here. We're probably good for about an overdose a week here in Norwalk as it goes. So it's really challenging. And then if you couple that with the lack of teeth in the law as far as what we can do to force some interventions with these kids, it's even more challenging. So with the juveniles going to the juvenile review board with their first interaction with law enforcement, having possessed marijuana minus an arrest, there's no teeth if they fail out. Like Mr. Walenchik was saying earlier, without the teeth behind it, the kids aren't compelled to comply. And when they fail out, it is what it is. So I sit on the juvenile review board every week here in Norwalk, and we've got a good flow of cases. And I think Jay Gettner would agree that when there isn't an arrest, the kids are much less compelled to cooperate. And when they don't, there's really no lasting consequence. So in a recommendation moving forward, I think that needs to be addressed.
I think you all have raised some great points. I think generally one of the asks is really, why are we treating cannabis differently from alcohol in so many ways in terms of, consequences to youth, advertising, warning labels, et cetera. Terry, did you have your hand up again? No. Okay. Any questions, clarification questions from legislators for law enforcement? I haven't seen the other hands, so I'm going to move us rapidly on so we could have our final section. No, did I hear from a legislator? Sorry.
Sorry, Margaret, just very quickly. Sergeant Orr, did you say one overdose a week in Norwalk? I wanted to make sure I heard that correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. Really sorry to hear that. Okay, thank you, Margaret. Sorry to jump in.
No, thanks, Senator Haskell. All right, so let's just move on to our final speaker, which is Diana Revolus from the Norwalk Common Council, member of our Norwalk Partnership, and she's going to talk about community considerations. Diana?
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I am a councilwoman for South Norwalk, but I am also first and foremost a community advocate. Why I am here is to express maybe a little bit different on a narrative that everybody else is discussing. Perception of risk actually culturally looks quite different, where you have a community that may see the perception of risk being just how harmful marijuana could be. There's a community whose perception of risk was economic, was incarceration, was everything but we see today. In our areas right now, we are being heavily impacted by these associates, these areas being compacted within our areas right now, not the only, but within South Norwalk in particular. So I asked, especially that how this has been brought up, is how is this conversation, or how is this showing the community that Norwalk wasn't for this, okay? Then in the same community that we're seeing this, people, children, and families inequitably got arrested and persecuted for the exact same things. When we talk about even these certain establishments being funded to be in these areas, understanding the social economic impact to the community that it's set within, I think needs to actually be understood, aware, and discussed, right? It brings up the question again of density regulations and how exactly, we want to see, however you may feel, but how do we want to see Norwalk handle this? Especially not only being here, but how does it go back to reparations for the community that it actually depleted and hurt at some point in time? I ask that we also understand that, there is an increase in, for example, if you see this, like one of those stores that's a vape store now used to be actually a community art studio for our children that we created, that I actually, my company used to be in as well, that we've created a vape store for. So if we talk about risk, and we talk about certain perceptions, and we talk about how our children may react, and we talk about the community that was dismayed about this, how does this actually look like we care versus we want the dollar instead? In that being said, with the dollar, I think that the fact that we have the idea of social economic and innovations funds and preventative and recovery services, but that should be forefront, not just in 2004. I've seen other places that actually have found a way to make this a space and place that could actually be of reparations to a community who has suffered the same impacts that have gone to, for example, systemic incarceration. There's also an increase that we should know about that connects with e-service, like e-cigarettes, or using these vape situations, that we're, again, showing that we're not only okaying, but we're implementing. I want us to truly pay attention to not only how this impacts how we look as a community, especially someone who pushes holistic care. So that can go many ways, especially with the argument of marijuana, but we need to imply exactly what we are. We also need to think about the concern of the quality of products that we get, the concern of disproportionate arrests for areas that are surrounding us, that people will come in, but the people who live here may sit with that, where other people will come in and leave and disperse. Again, if we are concerned about our community, and especially and particularly the ones I speak out for, the ones whose family were particularly impacted by something that was just straight politically driven, we need to then honestly and intentionally have an idea and conversation on how to make this an equitable situation for our communities, how we give an understanding of where those densities happen. And for me, I always say, if you don't want it to happen in Old Witch, don't put it on Woodward Ave. So let's really think about how dense we want, and where should this be? Our South Norwalk area is supposed to have a school at some point in time. What should our elementary school kids be seeing when we already have two here, right? We have a mall here. We have a lot of things coming here, but we don't have the ability to have equitable space and home ownership. We need to decide. And that's my ask. Whatever you are in the argument, but understanding that there was a community definitely impacted by this that needs to be addressed and understood. I'm not going to keep you any longer. I will give it back to Margaret because I myself have an appointment to go to after this too. So I hope we all just think about this as a councilwoman. I hope that we just look at how we're impacting our less fortunate community, to show them an industry that incarcerated them, but is being flaunted and successful right within their own living arrangements and environments. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. And a lot of what you talked about is going to, of course, be discussed within Norwalk and within communities around the state. But at the same time, I think there's always the opportunity at the state level for the legislation to look at, are there some guidelines we put in place so decisions aren't being made? Some of the same decisions don't have to be made community by community, and maybe sometimes over-influenced by what Diana said, which is the money side of things, right? Because there's what about the culture, what about the community as well? So any comments or questions for Diana before she runs from our legislative delegation? I didn't see anyone raise the hand. Wait, there's something in the chat. Oh, just a comment, Diana, that Art Center example is very powerful, right? You lose the Art Center, you gain a head shop.
In that order, thank you for that, but very true. Thank you.
All right. So I don't see any specific questions for you, Diana. So at this point, I would like to let everyone know we've kind of concluded having individual speakers talk through key points, and we're here for any, open Q&A about any of these topics. I see Jonathan Steinberg raised his hand, and absolutely, as chair of the Public Health Committee, co-chair, Jonathan, we'd love to hear your perspectives here.
Well, I have a lot to say. The question is, do you want to hear it all? One of the conundrums we're facing currently is that this is clearly a work in process, in that we have, as a legislature, delegated to the Department of Consumer Protection great leeway in shaping how marijuana will play out in the state of Connecticut. Many of us have been working for years, initially maybe opposing the legislation, but as it became clear it was going to pass, trying to shape the legislation, give clear direction to DCP as to how to proceed. I think our efforts were mixed in terms of results. For example, we tried to put a lot of pressure to define a cap on potency, and we succeeded. Unfortunately, we succeeded in a half a loaf kind of way, in that the potency levels, at least in my view, are way too high. And maybe that's just a starting point for DCP, but I would be willing to try to bring those potency levels down. There are issues relating to, as we discussed, the marketing. Nobody, I think, really anticipated the billboard on I-95 for out-of-state marijuana appearing so fast, but that should have been a wake-up call to us that we need to put a lot of attention on the marketing, labeling, packaging of these products. And that's still all hanging out there. There are opportunities for us to advise DCP on how they might want to move forward, short of having to legislate it, because I don't know, frankly, if there's any great interest on the part of legislative leadership to revisit this issue this year before DCP comes forward with its final regulations. To Senator Wong's point, many of us beat the drum very hard to have this bill come to public health. And I'm partially responsible, I suppose, for why it didn't, because it was very clear we were going to hold them to a standard when it came to the science and the health that they were not prepared to actually hear, because they felt it might actually shift votes and endanger the outcome of the bill. My committee is glad to take on legislation, particularly if they're minor tweaks, but I will not understate the challenge in getting leadership to want to address this bill this session. So that's why I still continue to put emphasis on trying to do things through the regulatory path while the door has yet to close on that. To get this information, I don't think DCP needs to be acquainted with the concerns and facts about marijuana in general. I think DCP needs help in promulgating regulations that protect the public. And unfortunately, no state has done particularly well with this to date. You look at the initial disaster in Colorado, you look at the problems in California and elsewhere, Every state is going to struggle to do this. Connecticut, being a small state, has some advantages, but we're now surrounded by states that are all going this way. And some of our ability to protect our citizens is only as good as the porosity of borders and what other states are doing. For example, we talked a bit about overdoses. The opioids group that I talk to regularly, I've been talking a lot about the presence of fentanyl appearing in marijuana sold on the street. One could argue that's actually an argument in favor of state-sanctioned recreational marijuana, because maybe we can minimize the dangerous black market product out there, but nobody believes we get rid of the black market entirely. So it's still on us to come up with really strong, explicitly specific language that can help us control things. The door is not yet closed, but I think we need to be very specific here about what you'd like to see the legislature take on. And I think you need an action plan for approaching DCP, and we legislators are glad to help because it's in our interest as well to get this addressed sooner than later on things that we can still do to make sure they're doing everything within their power to create a rigorous system whereby there is some measure of confidence in the Connecticut product. And I'll leave it at that.
Jonathan, thank you very much for those comments. I think we want to work with you on exactly what you're saying around approaching DCP. And I think it would be great also if the Public Health Committee can attempt to raise legislation with making some, closing some of those loopholes, like why are pre-filled vape cartridges exempted from the potency caps? Because you're right, those potency caps, that's going to be altering them even further would be a big push, right? It was hard to get them in the first place. But why are we exempting the product the kids are using the most? I think that those warning labels, let's get warning labels on packaging. The law is pretty clear right now. Just warn people that you can't use it if you're under 21. So I think there are some of those things that we would like to see get legislated. I also think there's this distinction between what DCP is responsible for and other public health considerations. The bill actually specifies that it's the Alcohol and Drug Policy Council, ADPC, that's going to make recommendations related to public health and the cannabis bill. And ADPC isn't supposed to come forward with those until 2023. So there's a whole lot of cart before the horse stuff. Get the product out there and then later figure out who are the drug recognition experts, what are the consequences, and who should be educated on it. So I want to, yes, and right? Yes to DCP, and also any legislation we can work on. We're here to work with you guys. Senator Wong?
Yes, Margaret, and I want to acknowledge Representative Steinberg, and he's right on with the challenges that we have, and I'm eager for us to work together with DCP. But I think another issue that needs to be considered is revisiting the police ability to enforce the law and protect the community. So I hope that will be another point of consideration in regards to reasonable search and the ability to have law enforcement to be able to support and protect the community as well. The diagnostic has not been tested, but I think we need to quickly rush through that. But I think the most important thing is having this conversation. The bill is in our world right now, so we need to do the best that we can and look forward and not backwards. So it's good to have Jonathan get his viewpoint, and I'm eager to work with him as well. But thank you so much for holding this program. But it is a multi-pronged approach, right? You've got prevention, which all of you as big advocates. We got the medical profession, but we also have law enforcement to ensure that public safety and the overdose number of Norwalk is shocking to me. And I think this is not just simply a freedom of exercise of adult choices to be able to make that in viewing in marijuana, but it does have significant societal impact and consequences, and we need to be conscious of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Margaret, if I could just interject real quick. We have had numerous cases this year where kids in the middle school, and in one case, a fourth grader got a hold of a vape pen, and we had one case of a fourth grader smoking a vape pen on a bus, and it was reported to the school by another student. Thankfully, we were able to get in touch with that student, get the vape pen, and deal with the parent. But with this stuff now legalized, adults are doing it a lot more in their homes, and kids have greater access to this stuff. So perhaps the legislation can include some type of specific stipulation regarding the parents' requirement to secure this stuff, much like they do firearms, so that kids can't get to it. I know we had 3 years ago, before this was legalized, we had a case at Ponus where 3 girls fell ill in the middle of the school day and were all getting sick in the nurse's office. And these are like 7th graders. And they had revealed that one of the girls had stolen some gummies from her dad's safe that he left open. So that should be addressed.
And that's when he even had a safe. But like to your point, people aren't even securing these products.
No, it's right on the nightstand. It's legal now. So, I mean, it's going to be easier for kids to get.
I'm looking at the time and thinking we should wrap up in about 4 minutes. So, this is wide open. Comments from anybody here or questions?
I would just say again, and when we do this, I know it's very easy to say the parents, the kids, so on and so forth. But again, we have breweries, we have liquor stores, we have smoke shops in every corner, in display everywhere, gas stations, utopia. What is the conversation that you're trying to show? Okay. So yes, and even in those stipulations, I know it's really quick to say that, but again, those can really happen despairingly. And for us, and when I hear that, I just hear the war on drugs happen again, and the wrong people just get continued, because the same way my child will get affected because they have a vape pen is not the same way other children will get affected because they have a vape pen. So I really want you to be conscious of that when you're speaking or engaging of this. And understand the parents now who are parents. A 16-year-old, it could be a parent now. So how are you talking to them? But that being said, that's all I wanted to say. And when you're thinking about this, the how is the most important, and how you see the community who's dealing with this is also important, because the actual drop of risk has been greater in white young males. You know what I mean? So, and we also have a great array of we're here for marijuana, but there's a lot array of other drugs that are out that's causing great problems, like acid or fentanyl. So I just want this to be a thought of when you're thinking of this and the community who it's going to impact, and particularly. Thank you.
Nicole, were you just trying to add something?
Yeah, sorry, I'm pulling over real quick. My name's Nicole Hampton. I'm a woman in long-term recovery. I'm also a parent in Norwalk. And, I think it's so key that we address THC level. I think that's unheard of. And also, let's let our law enforcement enforce. I'm all about accountability, and, I advocate for treatment versus jail time, but we need to be able to prosecute. You have to hold people accountable. I don't even let my daughter ride her bike around our neighborhood anymore because I have clients that had 2 DUIs during the day and they're just dismissed. I don't care if you're black, white, orange, purple. It doesn't matter. People need to be held accountable, and we need to help our law enforcement. We need to back them up so that kudos to them, right? But still, when it gets to the courthouse, the prosecutors need to prosecute. That's my whole spiel. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. All right. So if there are no further comments, we'll let you guys go. But one final word would be, thank you to the members of the Norwalk Partnership and Westport Prevention Coalition, which are the town's coalitions of people concerned about preventing substance misuse, meaning underage substance use or misuse by adults. I would really invite our legislative delegation to be following us on social media. Everybody's on Facebook and Instagram. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Norwalk Partnership and the Westport Together website so that you get blog posts and newsletters and know about things that we're all working on and concerned with. You are always welcome to attend any of our monthly meetings. I know we've had several of you at some of them. And I actually realized that I saw Chris Perone raise his hand and then put it down before. So any comments from you, Chris, before we go? If he's still here. He might have jumped off. All right. Well, I'm going to close out, you guys. Thank you all so much for being here and have a great week.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Margaret.
Margaret.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank
Have a great day. Bye.
you, Margaret.
Thanks to
Stay
the
on.
Everybody stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Uh,
I'm staying on, Margaret, a few seconds.
Sure. Thanks, Tony.
Happy, healthy. Hi, Ginger.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm
Love
okay.
what you had to
I'm
say.
okay.
I loved it. I loved it. Thank you.
Yep, so important.
It is, and I appreciate it. And you know, look, we got to work together. So it is what it is right now. All right, be safe. All right, take care.
Take care.
Take care.
Happy, healthy.
See you.
Hi, Nicole.
Hey, Nicole, you still with us? Oh, let me stop.